Sally, and he's gonna make sure.
Hey, Raymond. How are you?
Just take one of these and
Stuff the ballot box.
yeah.
No,
you can't. It look like you do.
Okay.
Check this out.
I'm shaking here. Sign it.
Ah, I shall.
You need my sign. Your sign?
Sarah?
Keep the cap on.
The Association Executive Board, I welcome you to Denver, to the second annual convention. Glad that you all made it through the snow. We have a very exciting program, I think, set up for you this next 3 days, starting exactly today with our keynote speaker, Dr. Wesley Wicksell. My role in this effort is a very minor one, and I'd like to, in just a moment, turn this over to Sally Howe to talk about the program of the day, some very minor changes. But before I do that, I'd like to credit a number of people that have contributed greatly. First of all, each of you for coming and attending and helping in your own way contributing to the success of this venture. Certainly to Ray McKelvey, sitting over here, who is our local arrangement chairman. The hat on. If you have any needs at all, Ray is in a position to know what's going on around here, and particularly if you have any needs relative to any particular program. In addition, we'd like to compliment Bob Miller and Diane Bone and Dee Style and a number of others out there who made registration run very smoothly today. A tip of the hat to them. Finally, to Sally Howe, who started back in 1967 to organize this program. In a recent letter I wrote to Sally Howe, I said, a year ago we were just starting to plan the convention in Atlanta. Sally started planning this convention in Atlanta, and I think her efforts and plus the members of the program committee show through. So, Sally, a credit to you. At this particular time, I'll turn the program over to Sally. She has a few changes to make, and then I'll take it back over, and then we'll go to Dr. Ralph Nichols and Dr. Wesley Wicksell. Thank you.
The people who are putting on programs have been wonderful to work with. They've been very gracious. Some people submitted programs, and maybe we had 2 programs that were similar, so we put them together, or in some cases we said, well, we've already got a program on that, would you do something else? So they've really been wonderful to work with. They're all here at their own expense. We don't pay any speakers. They're paying the fees just like everybody else is. And we really appreciate that they're willing to do that and come at their own expense. We have just several minor changes. We're sorry to say that Joan Sayer is not able to be here. Joan was going to be on the program for preschool and elementary. She had a very unfortunate experience in mid-February. Joan was held up. A gun was pointed at her head. Her jewelry was stolen. Her money was stolen. Her car was taken. All her materials that she had spent a lot of time getting ready were all taken, and I suppose were dumped someplace by a burglar or robber who couldn't care anything about listening, but took all of her things, and so she was not able to come, but I'm pleased to announce that Ann Seidler will go ahead with that program without Joan. Also, Kathy Sanger is not able to be here. Kathy was going to do a program on an audiovisual approach to teaching note-taking skills, but we're very pleased to announce that the people from Variable Speed Control will be doing a program, and that will be in place at the time where Kathy's program would have been, and that will be in the Zephyr.
A drawing, I hope that you all have signed the back of this. This is a item that was designed by a fellow by the name of Carlo Bruni. I think I have that right when I don't. Carlo Bruni, employee of Spirit Univac in Italy. And this is basically from the Chinese pictogram, ideogram, the verb to listen. Finally, I would say this today. When we take a look around who's here, we see a number of people who are founding members of the ILA. In addition, we see people who are brand new, who are for the first time attending an ILA function. In addition, we see people like Ernest Mills, Charles Gott, Ralph Nichols, Wes Wixell, and many, many other people who span many years of the history of listening. It's going to be very interesting in a few minutes to hear Dr. Wesley Wixell, because if I understand it correctly, we go back into the 1930s.
1899.
The only thing I really remember about Dr. Wesley Wixell is I remember a speech that Ralph Nichols used to give in which he said, and there I learned about this fellow down at Stevens College. And then he paused and he said, Stevens College was a woman's finishing school, I believe. And then in an aside, but I know he never made this statement when Colonel was there, he said, and I wish my wife had gone there. You never thought they'd come back to you, did you? At this stage, I simply like to say, welcome. We're going to have a good time. More people will be coming in as the weather clears, as the planes land. We need your contributions. We need you for the future of the ILA. The ILA is going to grow and really reward each and every one of us, plus those thousands of people that we in turn can touch. We need your contributions. For that I say welcome, and let's welcome Dr. Ralph Nichols. Thank you.
Good afternoon, friends and fellow listeners. 35 years ago, a very young professor sat in his office at Louisiana State University and reflected upon a strange mystery. It was the mystery of how two gigantic programs, multi-billion-dollar programs in character, could travel side by side throughout the American economy, and although bearing similar goals and similar objectives, not one bridge had been built across one to the other. One program was labeled public education, and it was sprinkled with holders of BA, MA, and PhD degrees. It was distinctly academic. The other program was labeled in-service training programs in business and industry. And strangely, many times it seemed that the guiding force in that was the former sales manager of the company, now promoted and given the title Director of Corporate Training Programs. It was distinctly pragmatic. The young professor thought a while and came to a decision. I'm going to build bridges, he said. And the result of that has been a very beneficial influence upon both programs. Lucrative, too, in certain instances. And it's just a great satisfaction to me to introduce to you your keynote speaker, talking on the subject of making things happen. Dr. Wesley Wixell, that young professor from Louisiana State University. Wes?
Ralph, I wish my daughters and my wife were here so they could hear that introduction. But anyway, it's been some years since I saw Ralph, and there have been some changes in him, and in some respects, no changes. I see that he's still bald-headed. I have often wondered about bald heads. I think I should tell you about the situation down there at Tulane University. They were given a grant of $25,000 to study the problem of communication. Now, they knew that everything communicates, you see. They wondered, now, what can we study? So they thought, well, in New Orleans, we have an awful lot of bald-headed men. Now, that must communicate something. So they studied 10,000 bald-headed men. And a few weeks ago, they came out with the results of their study. They found that if you're bald in the front, that means you're a thinker. If you're bald in the back, that means you're a ladies' man. If you're bald in the front and the back, that means that you think you're a ladies' man. So now we know Ralph Nichols. But since I saw Ralph Nichols some years ago, he's grown a beard. Now, I can't understand why anyone would grow a mustache and a beard. So I asked a man in New Orleans one day, now, why in the world do you wear a mustache? He says, well, if I can't thrill him, I'll tickle him. Ralph must be quite a tickler, isn't that right, Colonel? But at any rate, it brings back wonderful memories to see Ralph and the Colonel again, and I'm awfully glad to be here. Oh, I think I should tell you that I've been told that I should watch the time very closely. It seems that in Baton Rouge there are two boys. One was a Catholic and one was a Baptist. Now, there are no Baptists here, are there? No Baptists. Fine, I'm safe up here in Denver. Well, anyway, they knew each other pretty well, but they decided they should know each other a little bit better. And so they decided they should visit each other's churches. And so on a Sunday following this conversation, the Baptist found himself in the Catholic Church. Now, he'd never been in the Catholic Church before, so he was confused. And so from time to time, he'd lean over and he'd say, "What does that mean?" And the Catholic would tell him. And they said, "What does that mean?" And the Catholic would tell him. This worked so well that after the services decided the Catholic just had to visit the Baptist Church the following Sunday. Believe it or not, he was there. He had never been in a Baptist church before. Everything confused him. For instance, just wallowing around in the bathtub and all the things that Baptists do, you see. Excuse me. Anyway, so he leaned over from time to time and he says, "What does that mean?" And the boy would tell him. And he said, "What does that mean?" And the boy would tell him. Until it came time for the minister to step up to the pulpit. And the first thing that minister did was to reach down his pocket like this and pull out his watch like this and place it on the pulpit. This confused the Catholic. He leaned over and he said, "What does that mean?" The Baptist turned to him and said, "That, my friend, doesn't mean a damn thing." So I will see that we get out of here. Say, did you take my notes? Just in case. I'll remember you a long time. Well, at any rate, seriously now, I want to say that it is an honor and privilege to me to be the keynote speaker at the annual convention of the International Listening Society. Now, you are in the forefront. After a long history of thinking, speaking, and writing about listening. For example, 5,000 years ago, there was an Egyptian vizier by the name of Ptahhotep who wrote a manual on how to conduct oneself. And this was a textbook. And in this, he referred to listening many times. Believe it or not, this has been found in the hieroglyphics in Egypt 5,000 years ago. And if you want to read this, you can find it on the papyrus in a museum in Paris. Now, some of the things that they wrote about, believe it or not, at that time are as follows. "Be not arrogant because of thy knowledge, and have no confidence in that thou art a learned man. Take counsel with the ignorant as with the wise. Then canst thou canst learn something from everyone. If thou art a man of note that sitteth in the counsel of his Lord, fix thine heart upon what is good. Be silent. This is better than teff flowers. Speak only if thou knowest that thou canst unravel the difficulty. Error has entered early into him who does not hear. As for the fool who will not hear, there is no one who can do anything for him. He regards knowledge as ignorance and what is beneficial as something harmful. A son who hears is a follower of Horace, and it goes well with him when he has heard. Hearing is good for a son who hears, when hearing enters into the hearer. For he who hears will become a judge. Hearing is good and speaking is good, but he who hears is a possessor of benefits." And finally, and there are many other references to listening in this manual, "If thou art a leader to whom petition is made, be kindly when thou hearkenest to the speech of a petitioner. Deal not roughly with him, until he hath swept out his body, and until he hath said that on account of which he is come." Now, this is amazing to me that this can be found in the oldest material that you could possibly find in the whole world. This is it, papyrus in Paris. Well, following him through the centuries, just to mention a few, we have Socrates, for instance, we have Confucius, Jesus, Shakespeare, and you know Shakespeare in Hamlet had Polonius in his last speech to his son say, "Give every man thine ear, but few thy voice." And Shaw, George Bernard Shaw, said in one of his plays, "I dislike him because he only listens when he talks." However, until this century, we find no evidence of any real research or formal courses in listening. Then, in the 1930s, 40s, and 50s, research projects were underway and listening programs and courses were taught, and Ralph Nichols, our own Ralph Nichols, was in the vanguard. Listening, in one way or another, was taught in the universities of Florida, Michigan State, Denver, University of Minnesota, and, as was mentioned here, in Stevens College in Columbia, Missouri. I would like to take a few moments to tell you about the Stevens College experience. In 1929, James Wood, the president of this small college, 200 students or so, women, decided that the thing to do was to get at the needs of women. And so he employed then Dr. W.W. Charters of Ohio State University to conduct a research on what the activities of women really were. Charters in 1929 asked 5,000 women to write a diary for 1 week as to what activities they participated in. He tabulated this, and you can guess what he found. Communication was the one activity that every woman participated in, plus physical education. Well, Stevens committed to the idea of getting at the needs of students and individualizing instruction, went to work and started a communications course. Well, over the years, they worked on this, and they found, of course, from the Rankin study, which also, as you know, took place in 1929, and where he had zeroed in on the areas of communication and found that 45% of our time is given, or the time of the people who participated in the experiment, participated in listening. So the communications course then had to be more than just English composition, which it had been in the years past. So they said, in Stevens, we're going to have one required course, communication and physical education. Believe it or not, that was the only required course for graduation. All other courses were elective. Well, then, work was begun on trying to get at reading, writing, speaking, and listening. Obviously, you can't teach all of those skills in one 6-hour course.
Come out and they dazzle you just like magicians. Have you ever had a magician tell you how he does the trick? No, you got to go to the magic store and buy them, but you can't buy those good ones. They don't sell them. They don't tell you. They just demonstrate and entertain. Well, I think we ought to stop entertaining people and show them how they can remember more and remember better. Now, Wesley, you may never need those notes again. See, if you stay right here till 3:45, you may never need them again. And now I know you're sitting there saying, you say, well, golly, 3:45, how are you going to teach us memory in an hour and 10 minutes? Well, I'm going to have to condense it. All teachers have to do that. All speakers have to do that. I'm going to try and do in an hour and 10 minutes. Not what I would do in a full-day course, which you need for memory. One day to lay it all out. There is a duplicate system for remembering lists of any kind. So I probably will get through only one of the types of memory for remembering lists, the stack and link method. And that's fine, because you can use that. And then we're going, and it doesn't take a long time to understand it, but I'll apply it to speech, and I'll apply it to meetings, and you can apply it to teaching, because I do. And then maybe get along better. If you ever lose your notes, you'll have it right here. See, you don't see me with notes. I've made a couple notes here to remember, to tell you the applications. But I'm going to use some application in what we remember. I'm going to use a couple little lessons that we'll be teaching double that way. Then the second thing we'll do, what will you do second? We're going to do numbers. Usually nobody touches that. Dale Carnegie never touched numbers. Oh my gosh, no, that's too hard. Well, you only have to learn 10 things to remember numbers. You know that fellow with the AB, Wesley? Then the world's going to teach him the rest of the ABCs? Well, all you need to know to remember numbers, and we've got a lot of numbers to remember. We're going to have a lot more. They may go to a 9-digit zip code. My telephone credit card is 14 digits. The area code, the phone number, and the extra numbers they add. Jump and Jupiter. How do you ever get to use it? Well, you better have a memory course or some memory training in order to keep up with the numbers today. This is why I want to include that, because I think it's so important that we have some way to remember numbers. More reliable way. If you find it's harder than the usual way that you remember numbers, maybe by rote repetition or just writing down notes, fine. But I'll show you an easy way, a better way. You only have to know 10 things, because it's based on the phonetic consonant alphabet, which you already know by heart. Most teachers know. A, E, I, O, U, U-I-E-O-U. But it's based on the phonetic consonant alphabet, the 10 sounds in English. And so it's easy. Then, third thing is names. We don't want to leave that out. Look at all the names we're getting here. I think this is why Sally and others thought this would be good at the beginning of an association that has a lot of new people and a lot of veterans that many of us who are newer haven't met in person. But we're going to be challenged with names. One of our officers is an ILA, but it rhymes with rice, Weiss. Diane has an easy name, Bone, but it could be called Bonnet. Somebody French might say it. How do you say Bone? You don't use the accent, do you? See, but you have to ask the other person. If we guess, we can be wrong. And a person's name is to them truly the sweetest, most important sound in any language. Tell me how you feel when somebody murders your name. How about it, Wesley? Just say it once so I hear it, last name. Well, I didn't catch the name. I didn't hear the name. I know Wesley would. But don't you see this at parties, meetings, and conferences? We never cared. We weren't listening. We never heard the name. If you heard it, you may remember it. If you ask questions about it, show an interest in it, then you may remember it. But we do not forget names. We never heard of them in the first place. Why not? Well, we'll talk about that in a moment. If you're more organized, and boy, will memory make you organized, just like the libraries, just like the FBI. The mind is an associating machine. Here we are, kids going into school, nursery school now, they have videotape and computers, but they don't teach them how to listen too much, too many places. Some schools they do. They don't teach them how to share, they don't teach them how to remember. If you don't remember it, what good is it? I love Sperry Rand ads. If we don't teach our children to listen, how are they going to learn? Stop listening, stop growing, because we stop learning. But we have a brilliant mind here. It's 3 pounds. Each of us has the same size brain, relatively. 3 pounds up here, right in the front of the forehead. 11 billion cells has been the theory for years. 13 billion. Now, the newest data in the last year, 1980, say maybe as many as 100 billion cells. And all the experts say that if they could duplicate the human brain into machinery on the face of this earth, there wouldn't be room on the face of the earth for the machinery that can do what the human brain can do. I can ask you a question now and take you back to childhood, to youth, way back, 3 and 4 and 5 years old. You got the answer like this. I'll prove it now. I can get this mind to spin out to me answers faster than any computer. You can program a computer for the same things that I might ask you about from your life. You can program it, then you got to feed it a cue, type it in, get it in some way, and then click, 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 and it's going to come back. But I can get the answer faster. For instance, watch this. Watch how fast the mind works, and we're all up a few decades here, so we're going back a long ways to decide whether we raise our hand or not for this. How many did not attend kindergarten? Raise your hand, please. Now, more than half have them up, half have them down. You knew instantly. There's no computer that can get that data that fast. I have old people tell me, I go and talk in nursing homes, and they say, sometimes they're not so old, they're 60 and they look old. Dr. Peel is 81, doesn't use a note. He goes around the world twice in the last year giving speeches, and he gives a new sermon every Sunday, 20 to 25 minutes, from his pulpit in the Marble Collegiate Church. No memory. He's 81 years old, and he's talking 4 or 5 times a week, getting paid pretty well for it, but he doesn't need it. Multimillionaire. 81. Twice around the world in the last year, talking 4 or 5 times a week to the largest audience. 5,000 would be a piker audience for him in rallies and conventions, and he's sought after. He gets, the only one I know that gets a round of applause for coming out, as well as a standing ovation coming out, not just going away. I think they're applauding him for showing up at 81. Well, it says what we can do. I want to indicate to you, age has nothing to do with diminishing memory, maybe eyes. I got my eyeglasses here if I have to read something. Some people have trifocals, fine, early age. Well, some kids have eye problems, but the memory...
I'll say it again. Operating on the presumption that we ought to stick relatively close to a schedule and seeing a number of new faces, and James I. Brown, and a number of other people that have just landed. We welcome you to your 12-hour flights to sunny Denver. We have a rather special opportunity this evening to share with you what we billed as the Sperry Listening Story. As most of you know, the impact of the Sperry Corporation efforts in the last 2 years has been literally phenomenal vis-a-vis spreading the word of listening. Tonight we have with us 4 diverse people, diverse in the sense of their responsibilities. We'll start off the program with Del Kennedy. Del Kennedy is the director of the corporate advertising and public relations effort, in a sense, in the corporate office out of New York City. Del is on the far right. He will start off this evening. Del will, amongst other things, share with you some of the strategies and orientations relative to the advertising effort. We'll move from Dell to, pardon, Dell? We'll move from Dell to Diana Whitney. Diana is with Sperry Unified out in the Pennsylvania area, and her position is primarily in the area of organizational development work as a PhD in communication from Temple, and is doing some of the training, much of the training work for the Sperry Corporation. We then will get a little different perspective. We'll move to Fred Taylor. Fred Taylor, immediately to my left, is the branch manager of the Portland, Oregon office, and is out there in the marketing, selling area, and will share with us some of their results and efforts in terms of the impact of what began as an advertising campaign relative to marketing. And then we will conclude with Peter Hines. Peter Hines is the director of the International Director of Communication from London. Peter was involved in the origination of the Sperry Listing Program back some 2 years ago. We will run roughly somewhere around 40 minutes, roughly, with these presentations, and then we'll have an opportunity at the end for your questions to each of these individuals. So with that, Del, would you start us off? Thank you.
Strategy and orientation, all right. Thank you, Manny. Wish Bob Montgomery had written my speech for me because I've got it on 15 pieces of paper. And I'm not too well organized, but we'll try and save some time. You really don't know how pleasant it is to stand up in front of a group of people who appreciate how important it is to listen. It's also somewhat frightening because for us to know that you're listening is not something that we're really used to all the time. I'm sure you'll detect a thread through our presentations of the difficulties that we have had over the years internally in the development of the program, in confronting the cynics and the non-believers over the years. Sperry's Listening Program. Thinking about my commentary, I'm going to call it Kennedy's Big Bang Theory. There's a little confrontation going on in Los Angeles right now involving the fundamentalists on one side and the scientists on the other. I'm not going to get involved in that, but it occurred to me that the Big Bang Theory does describe my perspective on how this all came about. First, I could only get permission to assemble this group of people and to bring Peter over from London if I delivered a commercial. So I've got to tell you a little bit about Sperry. It is, I think, however, important for you to understand very basically the organization and the kind of corporation Sperry is. We're not in the frozen custard business. So you should have a backdrop against which the Sperry Listening Program was developed. So first, the commercial. Sperry is a $5 billion corporation. We employ over 90,000 people around the world. We market products in over 140 countries, and we have manufacturing facilities in 60 countries. Our 5 product divisions can sell you anything from a space shuttle navigational system to a manure spreader. Obviously, we're a very large, a very diverse, a very complex corporation. End of commercial. I was also forced to bring a little handout, and so my boss would be quite pleased if you would pick up this little thing on your way out. But in that kind of company, doing business in so many divergent markets, so many divergent industry segments,
geographical diversity, language diversity. It has been fundamental to corporate management that the key to our success, by whatever way you wish to measure success, is communication. Internal communication between our divisions, within our divisions, and between the divisions and corporate headquarters, and external communications to the outside audiences that have an influence over our ability to do business, and those audiences that also have a stake in the success of the way we conduct business. We are particularly fortunate in our collective opinions up here to have a management characterized by our chairman of the board, who is, how do I say it, the strongest advocate of communications training that I have ever run into. He himself is probably one of the more dynamic personal communicators at a chief executive officer, chairman of the board level that I've had the pleasure of listening to. Mr. Lier, Paul Lier, has stressed this in every internal meeting that he has ever attended. This strong commitment to communications is evident in the type and the variety of training programs which we have been doing for years within our various product divisions. From sales training to communication skills training to performance evaluation training, many things which Diana will touch on here in a few moments. We promote customer meetings where our customers get a chance to talk and we get a chance to listen. And in many of these cases, we must formally, in writing, reply to their comments. That's a given going into many of our customer and user meetings. So the need for communications and the skills necessary for good communications has been well understood and is embedded in a variety of ongoing internal training programs within Sperry, and they have been for many years. Now that's the background and the framework that makes up what I call one element of my Big Bang theory. While all of that is going on a day-to-day continuing basis on this side, let me discuss the other element associated with the Big Bang. Advertising is a function that is charged with the responsibility of communicating with external audiences, customers, prospects, employees or potential employees, investors, potential investors, influence groups, legislative bodies, a variety of that great unwashed mass outside. We attempt to inform, to persuade, we attempt to create an image, a perception of Sperry that makes it an attractive investment, a good place to work, or a company that I'd like to do business with. This is very simple to discuss, but it's a very difficult thing to accomplish given the divergent product lines, the divergent markets that our product divisions serve that I mentioned earlier. Given the limitations of the media available, the printed page in a magazine or a 60-second spot on television or on radio, very limiting. Nonetheless, research which is conducted on an ongoing basis periodically has shown that from an external communications point of view, Sperry had been making progress in improving perceptions and awareness, these very kind of nebulous words. But we still weren't being given credit for our successes, for the financial successes that we have achieved, for the constant profit and revenue growth over the last several years, the fact that we're the second largest computer manufacturer in the world, we're the largest manufacturer of specialized farm equipment is not generally a well-known topic, even within our target audience groups. We're an acknowledged leader in the aircraft and aerospace and marine navigational guidance and control systems. So the advertising organization, and at this time it was fortunately under the direction of Pete Hines, were told to fix it. That's the way Mr. Liais communicates. And that's the second element of my Big Bang theory. The ad department and the advertising agencies and other people involved started the long, arduous task of interviewing, researching, reviewing, to come up with that one creative spark, that one element that would help distinguish Sperry from all of our competition. Pete told me at lunch today that it was 3 years ago this very month. As a matter of fact, he thinks it's March 24th. In Houston, the two critical elements came together. And the spark was there to ignite the Big Bang. The Houston marketing manager for Sperry Univac. Now, he is a man who has been a product of the ongoing training programs that have been conducted with marketing skills, communication skills, and so forth. The beneficiary of all of that investment said in response to a question, the difference is we listen to what the customer wants. Bang. Nobody had said it quite that way. Nobody had thought about it in quite that light. Now, I'm going to do a great disservice in one respect, but a great service to all of us in another, and blithely skip over the next 18 months of agonizing, bloodletting, trial and error, false starts, not believable, not credible. Those are two qualities, by the way, which all advertising must have. We needed help. We discovered that during this 18-month period. And it's during that 18-month period that we made the acquaintance of a charming, delightful, rather semi-rotund young man from the Midwest, Bob Newhart. I think we all. I would like, again, on behalf of Sperry, to acknowledge the assistance which Manny has given this program in giving it believability and credibility. As a result of Manny's involvement, we began seriously to look at listening and what it implies and where it falls within the parameters of basic communication skills. We learned a lot. Diana, again, will get into a lot more detail on the training aspects that resulted from our affiliation with Manny. I'll go into a little bit of the external communications, talk a little bit about the advertising. The advertising, which is the external articulation of our position with respect to this subject, broke in September of '79. You may recall having seen some of these ads. I think they were passed out at your last meeting. It's about time we learned how to listen, which was the first ad of any series, talks about listening and the importance of it in a variety of environments, personal, business, political. How can we expect them to learn when we haven't taught them to listen? In addition to raising the interest level of a great deal of academics, it also got me a lot of letters from the feminists. We should teach her to listen also. I was baptized very early, Pete, after you left to the feminist movement. Knowing how to listen could double the efficiency of American business. Did you hear that? Was another ad in that series. we began to perceive from letters and comments that people weren't clearly understanding what we meant by listen. They thought it was just the act of hearing. So we whipped up an ad. Whip up anything. We glibly tossed off an ad. Knowing how to listen takes more than 2 good ears. And most of an executive's time is spent listening, yet it's the thing he's least qualified to do. Again, addresses the problem of lack of training and discipline. And the last ad in the series, this is an interesting one. It's a rather controversial one for a corporation who makes manure spreaders and computers and navigational guidance systems to run. And what's the point of talking? You don't listen to me anyway. There, in all of these ads, up to this point, there was a little line at the bottom that said, if you wish additional information, I can't recall exactly how it's worded, write to Department 4A, B, C, or whatever, and we'll send a little quiz that's on an we felt that this subject wasn't appropriate for a little quiz that's interesting and fun, so we did not put that offer in the bottom. This ad generated more requests for our quiz than any of our other ads, despite the fact that it was not. We had more positive comment from that ad than I think than almost any others. I'd mentioned the personal listening profile. This is the second printing of it. Again, I'm sure you have received copies of this at previous meetings. I have a few extras, which Continental Airlines would be glad if you would take out of my suitcase so I don't have to pay excess baggage. But this is the response piece, revision 2, of our listening profile quiz. It describes a little bit about how and why we're doing what we're doing. I don't know how many of you have seen this, so I brought a copy of this for all of you. I think all of you. The audience is a little bit larger than you couldn't fit in a bread box, Manny. I mean, you didn't tell me there would be this many people. How important it is to listen. We've taken the 10 keys to effective listening, and we've taken essentially the listening model that we subscribe to, and illustrated it with cartoons. I find these cartoons to be, I find them personally to be very fascinating, kind of a New Yorker-ish, tasteful cartoons. We ran a little contest in the office to see which was the most popular one, and I won't tell you which one won, but my favorite is, one of the keys obviously is to listen for ideas, not facts. You're all aware of that key. And we've illustrated this with a little classroom scene. And obviously the teacher has asked Johnny to a question concerning the 19th century. And Johnny responds, 19th century. The 19th century consisted of the years 1800, 1801, 1802, 1858. My favorite cartoon. Reaction. What has been the response and the reaction to this program, the Sperry Listening Program? Again, Diana will touch upon internal response and internal reaction to the training. Fred will touch upon the response in the marketplace. And I will be the first to admit that this is a very selfish program we're running. We're a profit-making organization, and we want to sell products. So one of the measures of the success of any communication program is, does it help you sell products? Does it help you get in the door? Fred has some very interesting comments in that respect. Talking about the advertising per se, though, we have received over 50,000 letters. I've got to state this right. 50,000 letters or postcards requesting the profile. We have received perhaps another 25,000 letters with requests that range all the way from a speaker, can I attend a course, can you send me your, I'm not counting those. We appear obviously have touched a raw nerve in the public. We've had telephone calls, as I mentioned, requests for a variety of assistance and ideas. Some of you may recall an ad, and unfortunately I forgot to bring it with me, an ad that we ran on October 28th, the day of the Reagan-Carter debate. The ad ran in the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times, and then I believe in local newspapers in the 10 major markets in the United States, plus 6 other selected cities based on Sperry employee populations. The headline was, "How to Listen When You Watch the Debate Tonight." That ad was read verbatim from headline to signature on 3 television and 8 radio stations that we're aware of. I am not aware of anything Sperry has ever done in the past that has gotten read on television or radio stations without us having to pay for it. Where do we go from here? We go to the glass of water. We've learned a lot over the past 18 months that the program is running. First, we've learned that a commitment to listen raises expectations. It raises the expectations of our employees. They say, "Hey, ads say you're going to listen to me. So sit down, turkey, and tell me where my raise is." It raises the expectations of our customers. Fred may have some comments on that. In many instances, these expectations are really unrealistic. And so there are risks that we are taking in the commitment to understanding the importance of listening, but there are also rewards. The next ad that you will see if you get the Wall Street Journal or the Financial Post in Canada, is a 2-page spread that will appear on March 31st of the Wall Street Journal called "The Risks and Rewards of Listening Well." And we're laying it out front. We describe the risks and some of the expectations which are unrealistic. Well, we talk about the rewards in our content, the fact that it pays to listen. We talk about the power of listening, what can be accomplished when people listen to each other and employees listen to each other. We talk about how knowing how to listen can really improve the way you think. And you got to, I guess I have to apologize here because we are not unaware that our major competitor is IBM, and so we do like to do little things which gives ourselves a warm feeling. No one out there is going to realize it, but we thought we'd just play off their word think with our word listen. To make the point that at Sperry, listening is not a 9-to-5 job. Peter's going to have problems with this in Europe because they got flex hours. They don't understand what 9-to-5 is. Where the ads that I've showed you before, we talked about the problems associated with poor listening, the costs associated with poor listening. In our terminology, we would characterize that as negative problem-oriented. And it was a very precise the decision that we took to take that route, negative problem, Titanic, Battle of Gettysburg, disasters. Many people believe that's not a good advertising, but we chose to take that to dramatize the point. The next series of ads will be positive benefits oriented. The benefits associated with good listening, the rewards of good listening. This ad, again, the only people that know it will be us, signifies the end of the negative cost program and the beginning of the positive benefit program. This is kind of our manifesto, if you will. I have only one ad in the new series and only one rather crummy copy of it because they're still in the process of retouching and all the things that ad agencies do to charge you so much money. but ads like this, and you'll notice a different look, slightly different look, slightly more involving photograph, more along the what we call the Kramer versus Kramer ad. Shorter headlines, shorter copy. Headline, listening well doesn't mean saying yes. We want to make the point that Manny and I have philosophical arguments on this, but at least Manny will admit that no is a good response. We're wondering if no response is a good response. But anyway, by being committed to listening well, doesn't mean that our salesmen or our supervisors or our foremen have to say yes because they are committed to listening. So that's where we're going. That print program will start in the States in April. It'll run in the same basic media that we've been running in. Bob, I got to page 5 and I got no end. I don't know what I did, but I guess that's as far as I could write. That briefly describes, I hope, the origin of the program, the background of Sperry, the results that at least the advertising has achieved to date, and where we're springing from and going to over the next 12 to 18 months with our advertising program. And I'd like to call on Diana, and Dr. Whitney will discuss a little bit about the training within Sperry Univac.
Quasi-academic setting, having been only a year out of the university. And my friends and colleagues say to me, well, what's it like out there in the real world? And I'm going to tell you what I tell them, and that it is no more real out there in industry than it is in the university, just different. What I want to talk about today are basically 3 things. I want to talk about the implementation of the Sperry listening theme, which we have come to call the Listening Training Program. But there are a variety of ways in which the theme has been integrated into the organization. I want to talk specifically about the training program, the day-long seminar, and give you a sense of what that seminar looks like, what the experience is for the participants, and finally talk a bit about some of the responses that we've had from various employees and management people throughout the organization. The implementation of the program. The advertising people, Del Kennedy and his communication people, worked in conjunction with the corporate personnel people in planning the Sperry listening program. The charter to do training and take this to the employees was given to the personnel department in the organization. I work for UNIVAC, and I am part of the UNIVAC personnel organization. In the beginning stages of this program, representatives from each of the divisions of the Sperry Corporation met with Dr. Stile to talk about listening, to be trained in listening, and then to subsequently develop listening training materials that we would use internally. This was 18 months ago. And over a period of 18 months, those materials and training programs have been presented to employee populations and groups and have been revised and adapted along the way. So I think that what we have now, 18 months later, is probably very different from what started out earlier as the result of the work that Manny did with these folks. However, the one consistent theme throughout is the conceptualization of listening. And we've really held on to the model that was developed by Nichols and built on by Dr. Stiles, and we've used that throughout our training programs. In terms of the implementation of the listening theme, we don't only do training. We've really taken this concept and embodied it throughout the organization. As Del pointed out, Paul Lier, our Chief Executive Officer, is very committed to listening as a very basic business philosophy, as a way of showing employees and customers we are committed to them. And so internally, we have had a record that went out to all of the employees. We've had a video cassette by the vice president of one of the divisions talking about his commitment. We have had recently audio cassettes that consisted of interviews on the part of Manny and other people talking about listening. We have built a performance review system in the company that's based on listening. We use what's called a coaching model, in which the manager and the employee meet together, and the employee talks first, and the manager listens. So they talk about the goals, they talk about the employee's behavior and performance against those goals, but the attitude of the manager is one of listening first and then talking. And so we've really taken the listening idea and incorporated it in a whole variety of ways. We also have had a very ongoing management development program. A large corporation has got to provide people with the skills to do their current jobs and to move into positions beyond where they currently are. And so the company has had a very extensive management training program. And we've taken listening and integrated it into those management programs so that our position courses for our sales managers, for our systems analyst managers, all include a listening module. We've put listening as such into our sales courses. We've put listening into our customer relation courses. So we've taken it and integrated it into the existing training programs. In many cases, it was there before the listening program actually began 2 years ago. More significantly, however, we've embarked on a plan to take a listening seminar out to all the employees. Now, I say that in a very idealistic mode, but we do have the intention of getting listening training to everyone in the company. Right now, our target population has been management, has been marketing people, and customer relation people, people whom we feel listening is a most crucial skill. The training seminar, we have a one-day program, a one-day seminar that runs anywhere from 6 to 8 hours with lunch and breaks and things like that. The objectives of this particular day are threefold. We focus on providing the people, the participants, with an awareness of the importance of listening, focusing on the attitudinal component. We then provide them with an opportunity to explore their own listening effectiveness. Spend some time thinking about themselves as a listener. Yes, frequently people think about themselves as a communicator, more frequently as a speaker. And we really ask them for the course of this day to put on a hat as a listener and begin to think about themselves as a listener and what are their strengths and their weaknesses. And finally, we aim to give them some techniques and some skills that they can work on, that they can practice during the course of the day, and then take back with them on the job and build and incorporate into the way they do business and the way they relate to one another. The day is broken down into modules, and the reason we've done that is because the time that we are given or allotted varies. I was in Houston 2 days ago, and I did 2 3-hour segments. And I can pull modules out and left them at home, and I put modules in, and I collapsed modules. And so our training design is generally modularized so that we can manipulate it pretty easily. The introduction of this seminar is a very important part. We have the participants introduce themselves. Even if they are an intact work group, we have them go through an introduction. One that gives us as a trainer the opportunity to get to know who they are and where the resistance is and who's going to be friendly and who's going to be hostile. But the introduction is based on what's your job, why is listening important to your job, and what are the things that you personally find as barriers to listening. And we have them talk for 30 seconds or a minute. And what comes out of this is the beginning of a dialogue that carries through the course of the whole day, in which they are beginning, again, to look at themselves as a listener, pushing them at what are your barriers, not what are barriers in general, you know, what are their barriers, but for you, what are the barriers to effective listening. We go from that introductory phase into a brief overview of communication and the importance of listening. And that's the point in which we give them the theoretical, conceptual framework of communication. We talk about communication as a simultaneous process, exchange of information between two people. We talk about meaning being in people as opposed to meaning being in words. We talk about listening as being more than hearing, involving all of the senses. And we talk about the importance of listening in terms of both professional and personal power. And that's the little lecturette, that's the bit that we do that's not as experiential as the rest of the day. From there, we moved into an opportunity for them to do an assessment of their strengths and weaknesses, and we have a couple of different instruments, none of which have been tested or as highly reliable or valid, but are really meant to be provocative, to have them look at some of the things that they do as listeners and where they're functional, where they work for them. And then have them do something, and this has evolved over the period of 18 months. We have them write a description, a case study, if you will, of a situation that for them is problematic. A situation, a communication situation, in which they are a listener, in which it's not working well. They're frustrated, they can't get what they want, they can't close the deal, they can't even get into the customer's account, they don't get along with the sales rep, they don't get along with the analyst. The controller doesn't really understand because controllers are only bean counters. You know, we've got all this organization mythology that comes out in these seminars. So we have them write down and document their situation. We come back to that at the end of the seminar. And we ask them at the end of the day to play out this situation. And now that we've talked about listening, now that we've presented you with some ideas about how you can be a better listener, play it out. Sometimes we bring them up in front of the group and we have them do it in front of everybody and we give them input. Generally, we have them work in groups of 3. And one of them is playing that other problem person and one of them is observing. When there's time, we have them go through this twice or 3 times. And it's amazing how much they get into it and how much they get out of it because it's their situation. We started the seminar 18 months ago with some films. We had models of people doing communication things, right? And then we had them look at these films. What could be done to improve that? I personally found it boring. You know, I also found it difficult to manage slides and the video cassette and all of the media that was involved. So we've phased that out and put more of the participants into the seminar, and we're finding that it's working beautifully. After they develop their own situation and write about that, we use a film by McGraw-Hill. If you're here, McGraw-Hill, we use it a lot. The Power of Listening. It's a half-an-hour film. It serves, again, depending on our timing, either as a way of closing the morning or opening up the afternoon. It tends to summarize a lot of what has been said and also then lead into what we're going to talk about in the afternoon. And we're very pleased with that film, and we recommend it wholeheartedly. The afternoon session then is spent looking at the SEER model. Is that pronounced right, by the way? S-I-E-R, model of listening, in which we present it very briefly and break listening down into 4 sets of behaviors: sensing of information, interpreting information, evaluating, and responding. And looking at those categories of behaviors, we've actually developed a topology of behaviors and have people, again, as we go through each of those steps, check off which of these behaviors do you do, which don't you do, which are most comfortable for you, and begin to build a profile, again, of their strengths and weaknesses. So at the end of the day, they've got some data for what they can do to improve. We use this model, and it works very, very well. It provides a lot of discussion around different communication activities that people engage in. The end of the day, then, is the practice session. And we have them go through their situation and role play. And then we have them at the very end write a development plan. And that's part of our general management development program. Almost all of our workshops end with a development plan, where the individual sits down and spends time thinking about themselves in relation to the material that has been presented. And then they take that and say, now here's what I'm going to improve, here's who I'm going to work with, and this is how I'm going to know that I've improved. When some of the time we ask them to take it back and share it with their managers. Occasionally they do and occasionally don't. But that gives them a way of looking at what they've got out of the seminar in relation to themselves. That's the seminar. Sometimes it's 4 hours and we scrunch it all together. Generally it's 8 hours. We give it to a variety of different kinds of groups in the organization. We have been very involved in top management briefings. And going out and working with Vice President and his group of directors and informing them about the corporate advertising program and about listening. They don't have 8 hours, right? But they've got 4, and they'll give us 4. And that's the time that we've got to work with. We generally will work with an INTAC, a marketing branch, an INTAC work group, especially if it's going to precede some kind of a marketing activity. So as you'll hear Fred talk about using these seminars and giving them to customers and prospects, we really encourage the local branch and our own employees to have had this prior to taking it out on the streets to customer groups. And so that's a lot of what gets us into the branches. Kinds of responses we've had. Kinds of responses. First 6 months that I was doing this, I could count on walking into the seminar and basically having eggs thrown at me. Tomatoes, eggs, all sorts of things. There was a lot of resistance initially, a lot of resistance. Part of that came because it was an advertising program. You know, this is an advertising program. What's it really going to do for me? Right? This is just advertising. The other part of it came from, I didn't really want to be here, but I got sent because somebody said I'm a bad listener. So we had a little bit of that initially. Even when we had that kind of resistance in the beginning of the seminar, we've never had it walking out. Never. The response to these seminars has been overwhelmingly positive. Employees get into it. The level of involvement is extremely high. They bring their professional situations as well as their personal situations in. And this is one of the changes that we made in taking out the role plays based on performance review or career development or customer relations, the sort of stock items that we felt were important. We allowed some flexibility for them to bring in personal problems that they felt could be improved by listening. We've got a lot of people who work on situations with their teenage kids. And so there's a great deal of flexibility for them to really focus in on and get involved, and they do, and they value it. And when you tell somebody, anyway, when you get up in front of a group of people and you say, you know, it's not the speaker's responsibility for making this communication effective and successful, they've got no choice, you know. They've basically got a choice of walking out or participating, but it works well. They also value the academic orientation. And this was something that's kind of caught us by surprise. Going back to that bridging the gap that Dr. Nichols talked about. The fact that we've got an academic orientation, we've got Dr. Stiles' model, we've got people like myself who are very knowledgeable in communication. I mean, I quote Aristotle. I don't go back to the Egyptians. My training didn't take me back that far. But I quote Aristotle, and that's intriguing, and it's valued. So they feel that we're giving something of substance to them, and that's important. They also come to realize that their credibility and their success in life, and whatever they do, depends on listening, and their listening effectiveness. And that's neat. That's a really neat thing. Two other kinds of responses we get. One is, can you do this for my customers? I want you to fix them. I work on this account, and boy, there's an analyst out there who doesn't listen. Can you go out and fix them? Make them a good listener. That we don't do. And the other response is, how can we use this to really capitalize on the marketing opportunities that are out there? And that response is one that we are all delighted to hear about, because as Del said, we're in the business of selling. My company sells computers. We've got a lot of products, and what we're all about is increasing our profitability. So I want to turn things over to Fred Taylor now, who's going to talk about how this whole program has been used as a marketing activity.
Thank you, Diana. I guess my brief speech could be listening as a marketing tool, or the mercenary aspects of listening. I don't know if what we did in Portland, Oregon has been carried forth across the entire country yet, but if it hasn't, I know that there are a number of people here that are certainly encouraging the marketing organizations to go forth with the listening seminar to our prospects. And if I can, let me set a stage for you. First off, Portland, Oregon, population 340,000. Northern Oregon, right on the border with the state of Washington, 38 fun-filled miles from Mount St. Helens, or what's left of it. One thing though, for the Chamber of Commerce in Portland, Portland never did have a problem with Mount St. Helens and the ash and all of that, so that feel free to visit and to recommend the area to your friends. I was sent to Portland as a branch marketing manager in early 1979. And to say that Portland, Oregon is a bastion for our best known competitor would be a major understatement. Our level of success in that area had been absolutely dismal. So the first 6 months in the job, I kind of analyzed what the problems were and replaced 2/3 of the sales force. And seriously, we did have some personnel problems. And then embarked upon hiring replacement folks. And fortunately, and one thing that Diana did not touch on, the listening aspect, the first shot I got at listening was in a Hiring for Excellence program that Sperry Univac has, which is very, very heavy orientation into listening and to really finding out about that person on the other side of the desk. I feel that I hired an excellent sales staff, but they were green to the Portland marketplace and in some degrees to large-scale data processing. So we then embarked on a very, very frustrating period where the sales rep would charge forth and get thrown out. It was into offices and right back out of offices and not getting hardly any attention whatsoever. It was almost a Rodney Dangerfield, really did any respect. We were having really a tough time penetrating what is a very challenging marketplace. We seemed to come in, a couple things came together at that time. I began getting phone calls and letters asking for more information on this listening thing that Sperry was putting in the print media, on television. And I said, well, okay, I sent out whatever I had that ended up coming in. I mean, I've been with another vendor for 13.5 years. I've been with Univac at that time for a little over 2 years. And nobody had asked me zip about any of our ads in the past. All of a sudden, this listening thing, people are saying, hey, send us something. We're interested. We're interested. So, now we have something that the people of Portland are finally interested in. We as a vendor have it. What in the world do I do with it? Fortunately, was able to contact Del Kennedy and explore an idea that had not up until that point in time been utilized within the company, and that was to bring listening to the marketplace. And so we did get the use of the individual that the Boston Herald had referred to as the young Hubert Humphrey, and scheduled Manny Style for January 29th of 1980. And we made a change in our entire thrust of our marketing efforts. We went out and began calling on the highest levels of management within the companies and telling them that we were going to sponsor an absolutely non-commercial seminar that would benefit them and their employees, and they were more than welcome to come on down en masse. It was the listening seminar. And all of a sudden, I mean, we began getting a horrendous response. I had to change the location 2 to 3 times to enlarge it. It was the greatest thing in the world. People out there really did want to listen. So we did have the seminars in Portland, the largest employer in the state. Asked us could we do one especially for them, and we did get 138 mid-level managers came down. Suddenly opened the door on that account. We also had a seminar for the general public. Had probably 130 or so folks come down to that. The long and the short of it was a whole new image was created for Sperry Univac. I have put on seminars, commercial ones trying to sell the computers. I've tried every non-commercial one I could dream up. You know, some were decent, some weren't so very good. It's the first seminar I'd ever put on that at the end of it, I was amazed. They give Manny a standing ovation, and then they don't leave. There I got 100 and some odd people sitting there, and every seminar I've ever had before in my life, it's like, it's over, and out the door they go. They don't leave. They're all sitting around, and they want more, they want more. Once they finally did leave, the comments were just, you know, addressing the professionalism of the company. In this case, all we said, too, is this is sponsored by Sperry Univac. We said that in the beginning, we said it at the end, and that was it. The compliments were outstanding, and they kept coming in, and then a few other more important things began happening. Requests were made, would we please come out and talk to the marketplace about the data processing needs. And so a green sales force that had been literally getting kicked out of some offices is now being asked to come in and to address the needs of the user. Very, very pleasant. It was very pleasing to me to see the interest of people in listening. I suddenly got just a whole new aspect on this thing, listening, and became kind of a believer. Becoming more so day in and day out. It turned out to be fabulous. Just as an aside, being the manager, I took a liberty to bring down my wife and oldest son to the seminar. Incidentally, I encouraged all the employees to come down with their families, which many of them did. I haven't had a good, solid misunderstanding with the wife or the son or any of the kids for over a year now. You know, I tell you, it's great.
You're losing that edge.
Yeah, I tell you. But personally, it was excellent. We made it a point to ask down the educators. The public broadcasting system came down, and we made available to them the different audio tapes of the ads that we were running at that point in time. The clergy was involved. I mean, it was the greatest thing going. People do want to improve their listening skills. Internally, like I say, the good misunderstandings, all the different organizations, the analyst groups, the engineering groups, and the sales groups really got a good, solid understanding of one another. And so internally, the improvements were significant. We are going to continue this. In fact, there is a program for our new fiscal year, which begins April 1st, that will involve Diana and other folks that now are available within Sperry Univac. We are going to continue the training of our employees, but we are going to continue to bring the seminar out to the end user. We are...
Sally Haug would like to make a couple of comments regarding the program. And while she comes up ready to do that, there are a number of you who are yet coming in, getting off airplanes, and we welcome you. For those of you who have not registered yet because of your late arrivals, if you'll immediately following this stage of the program, if you will see Bob Miller and Dee and Diane over here in the corner, will take care of all of that. And thank you, Sally. Are the McGraw-Hill people, Kathy?
Right here.
Over here. You want to come up for just a second? One of the very nice things that we've had happen to us throughout this convention is the attendance of the McGraw-Hill people and the ESC people. And McGraw-Hill, as you know, has been willing to donate a $1,200 value listening module. And for those of you that have had the opportunity to get in and look it over, Kathy Bruzzo is now going to draw for a winner.
I would like to say one thing. I'd like to thank all of you that were able to come up, look at my material, and sign up for the drawing. For you that don't know, I am leaving today, and tomorrow at the swap shop will be the Power of Listening Perception, and the 17mm version of Listen to Communicate.
Which swap shop, yeah?
The high school one. And just so you know, it is also college. It is not strictly high school. Okay, that's what's in the drawing. We're going to put up in front of people. Okay. Shaking here. Okay. The winner of the module is Jim Brown of University of Minnesota.
Oh, no!
Last year, we had a very special occasion at our Atlanta meeting. As you well know, the field of listening is not a brand new field. As Dr. Wixell suggested yesterday, we go back to Tahoe Tep. We certainly go back over the thousands of years, but in all clear reality, the field of listening is relatively new. If we go back to the 20s, and the 30s, and the 40s, and the 50s, and the 60s, and on to the present day, one thing that seems to me is centrally clear, and that is that each and every one of us here have a tremendous debt of gratitude to those who came before us. One of the decisions we made relative to our first convention at Atlanta was that we should honor those people who have contributed in rather significant ways to the development and the promotion and the study of effective listening. Last year we had the pleasure of inducting 4 members, 2 who were deceased, Paul Rankin and Sam Duker. We had the double privilege of inducting Dr. James I. Brown and Dr. Ralph G. Nichols. Isn't that a pair of bookends right there? And we're pleased that they're with us again this year. This year, we would like to induct 6 more members in the International Listening Association Hall of Fame. 2 deceased, 4 living, 2 with us. The deceased members, and we will have more information coming forth in our forthcoming newsletters honoring explicitly these people, are 1, Harry Goldstein. Harry Goldstein, as Ralph Nichols has mentioned many times, Columbia University, some critical work back in the 1940s, and in fact work that probably has led, amongst other things, some of the work in the area of compressed speech, rates of communication, etc. Harry Goldstein. Second deceased member to be inducted this year is Seth Fessenden. Seth Fessenden of California had tremendous impact on many, many people as a teacher of listening, including our very good friends who couldn't join us this year, the Geetings, Baxter and Corrine Geeting, and literally thousands of other people. When I asked Dr. Nichols his remembrance of Seth Fessenden, who by the way was shot in the library in a tragic fashion, when I asked Dr. Nichols his remembrance of Seth Fessenden, he said, meticulous researcher. And it strikes me as we take a look at the needs of this organization, we need to take and give credit to those who are meticulous in their research and follow in their role models. 4 living people we'd like to induct this year, 2 who were unable to be with us. 1, Dr. Carl Rogers, and 2, Dr. Miriam Wilt. Dr. Rogers is in Europe at this particular time. Dr. Wilt had planned to be here, perhaps has been caught up in the travel problems, etc. I don't know if you've read Carl Rogers' latest book entitled A Way of Being. If you haven't, I recommend it to you highly. It is, in a sense, a compilation of 46 years of a very special individual's efforts. And in this particular book, there's a chapter at the beginning entitled simply Experiences in Communication. And I'd like to read to you for just a short moment an idea or two that Dr. Carl Rogers has written. He says, in reminiscing about his experiences in communication, the first simple feeling I want to share with you is my enjoyment when I can really hear someone. And he goes on, I believe I know why it is satisfying for me to hear someone. When I can really hear someone, it puts me in touch with him. It enriches my life. It is through hearing people that I have learned all that I know about individuals, about personality, about interpersonal relationships. There is another peculiar satisfaction in really hearing someone. It is like listening to the music of the spheres, because beyond the immediate message of the person, no matter what that might be, there is the universal. Hidden in all of the personal communication which I really hear, there seems to be some orderly psychological laws, aspects of the same order we find in the universe as a whole. So there is both the satisfaction of hearing this person and also the satisfaction of feeling one's self in touch with what is universally true. And he goes on in that vein throughout a book that compiles and represents 46 years of high service to the development of effective listening. Although Dr. Rogers is not with us today, we do have a plaque, for those of you that were not here last year, comparable to the ones that we awarded last year, which will be sent to Dr. Carl Rogers, which says very simply, Dr. Carl R. Rogers is hereby inducted into the Listening Hall of Fame March 5, 1981, by the International Listening Association in recognition of extraordinary service in the promotion of the study and development of effective listening. Dr. Carl Rogers. Second party, who is living but cannot be with us today, Dr. Miriam E. Wilt. Dr. Wilt has had tremendous impact over the years, particularly at the levels of elementary education. Her work back in 1949 at Pennsylvania State College and over the years really put the spotlight on how young people spend their time, and particularly how they spend their time in the classroom. In fact, if you take a look at the flow from Dr. Wilt, in fact, let's back up a step. If you take a look at the flow from